Hey everybody, we're back with another Mental Health Monday. And today I want to talk about one of my favorite topics of conversation when it comes to challenges that game masters face, while also one of my least favorite feelings that I have at the game table, and that's imposter syndrome. You know, that feeling that when you're behind the GM screen that you don't belong there. You don't belong to in front of these people having a good time. They're having fun in spite of you, not because of what you're dishing out at the game table or the adventure you're helping to weave. You're just not good enough for this. So that kind of GM inadequacy where it seems like everyone there likes what they're doing and is having a great time with you, but sometimes as GMs we feel that we are definitely not performing well enough to really be worth this week over week responsibility of game mastering. And I know that for me, I definitely have this feeling quite often. Even when I think I've run a great game, I go through and I pick through all the little mistakes I made, all the little flubs in my language. If I did a crappy accent, or if my sense of humor didn't quite land during the session. I get that feeling of I am definitely not good enough. I am totally winging this, and I'm flying by the seat of my pants. And at some point, all of my players are going to figure this out and find that I am a terrible GM, and find another game master to play with, because there's a lot of game masters. But I'll say this: I believe that more game masters than less have these sort of feelings. Maybe not to the level of some of us where it bubbles up quite a bit. Like with me, I'm always feeling it. But I think that we all have these challenges of game master inadequacy, and it can be a struggle. So I feel this a lot when I'm gaming. And I think it's going through a lot of people's heads in our hobby. And maybe they don't want to share it or admit to it. And that's one of the things I want to make sure I'm doing on these vlogs on Mondays, is talking about things that maybe we don't all talk about enough. I think it would be less of a challenge if we got this off our chest. So in a game or in a hobby where one person at the table is expected to be the be-all, end-all arbiter of all rules and rulings and everything else gaming related, there is absolutely no way that imposter syndrome doesn't rear its ugly head, at least here and there. So just to be more clear, imposter syndrome is that feeling or belief that you are nowhere near as good or as talented or as capable as others believe you to be or perceive you to be at that moment. So it's the idea that people, they are going to see through at any given time the reality that you have created in your mind. This reality that you might be thinking, I am not good enough, and they don't believe it now, but at some point they'll figure it out that I am definitely not good enough to be a game master week over week. And let's be real, even though GMs and DMs are full participants at the game table, there is a lot riding on our shoulders week over week. Knowing PC backstories of every character at the table, like knowing every character's motives are week over week, and keeping that in mind, knowing the motives, known and secret, of all of the NPCs and nemesis and villains in the game, and sometimes monsters, right? Knowing what's going on in the game world at any given time. Right? If you're running a Dragonlance game, and it's set, like right before the Cataclysm, you might want to have an idea of when that's coming. If you're running a game where there's a great war taking place, you want to have an idea of who's winning at any given time. So you have to know that. You have to know the rules inside and out. And upside down and right side up. You have to know what each character class can do, and what each spell can do. You have to be able to answer at the drop of a hat any question thrown to you by your players, and try to keep as little gap as possible between what you hear from them as the question and what you say, because you want to create a believable fictional world and experience. That's a lot. And how can anyone keep this together? We can't. I don't know of any GM that can keep all of this together week over week without some kind of cheat code or some kind of tool or trick of the trade that helps them perform this way and share week over week a fun experience. And unless you're a professional game master where all you do is devote time to your craft like day in and day out, you're going to need to have some of these tools up your sleeve in order to do this effectively and to game effectively. And I truly believe that the most competent game masters and dungeon masters out there are those that are fully aware of maybe the gaps in their knowledge base or in their where their abilities are the strongest and where they aren't. They're aware of all this and they lean into it, and they still showcase the best game possible week over week because they're aware, or if there is that gap, they know when to lean on the players and when to ask the question. If a player asks the GM, there's that common trick. The player asks the GM, well, what does the baker look like? And the GM can throw back at them, what do you think they look like? It's sort of an admission that the GM knows or doesn't know what the baker looks like or what NPC it is, but gives the player a chance to wield the story a bit. So I have some tools from my toolkit that I'd like to share, some things that help me at the game table, because of all the game masters that I know, the one I think I'm the hardest on is myself. And I truly do think at times when I leave the table that, wow, I really winged that in a way that if the players really think this through, they're going to realize that was a terrible game I ran. Or, wow, it's really great we had a fun time with all the jokes at the table, because in reality, my game sucked. They just don't know it yet. I can't be alone in this. There has to be more of you that feel the same way. All right, one of the things that I do is I keep a campaign journal. All right, as I mentioned, we have to keep all this stuff in the background going, right? Well, in my campaign journal, I keep information on every player character, each important non-player character, and notes on what happens from each session. I usually try to devote about 30 seconds out of every 10 minutes of gameplay to write a sentence or two about what's happening in the game. Just so I know in the next week, I'm reminded as to what happened the week prior. And plus, I share this with my players so they can go back and they can take note. It really helps if you're playing a monthly game or something where you're not meeting weekly, being able to kind of go back and, oh yeah, that's what we did last week. Okay, so this week we're investigating what's happening with this secret cult. But last week we were in the dungeon and, we were, fighting this demon army or whatever. And there were some hints of the cult being still existing. And now we're trying to find the cult. Whatever. You have these details that you can kind of seed. And, there's some foreshadowing in your notes. If you're a good GM, you make sure you fleck out the foreshadowing you're trying to throw in, especially if the players don't pick up on it. Like if you threw some cool foreshadowing, like in that, they're fighting the demons or whatever, and you want to kind of point to there being a cult that maybe exists in the city that's still there that they need to deal with, and the players didn't pick up on what you said when you were describing the scene, you can always add that in the player notes, in the campaign journal, and maybe they'll pick up on it there. It's just, that's not really a tip for helping with imposter syndrome, but I think it is something that more people should do. So yeah, campaign journal, definitely use it. I'm right now, since I'm kicking off a 5e Talus game, I'm using the D&D Beyond character. I mean, they're putting their characters in the campaign through D&D Beyond, and I'm encouraging them to use their own notes section for their details. I'm going to try to lean on that for them. Actually, it gives the work to them, and it takes the effort off of me to make my players have to write. The next thing is, when you make a ruling at the table because of a rules question, take note and go back to that rule before the next game. And if your players were disagreed with you, and you figure out that you're probably right. Give the players clarity as to why the decision was the decision you made. But if you made the wrong call, just cop to it and be like, yeah, I made the wrong call here. I'm sorry, But don't be afraid, like to apologize if you maybe took a rule and twisted it to the detriment of the players without knowing. I mean, obviously, if you want to mess with the rules, it is your game. But but don't let it happen during the game. Like, don't bog down your game just to dig through the rules. Just it's not worth the time. And it also, I mean, if you can't make a quick ruling, it'll make them pull the books out, and now you're all taking too much time, and then you take a snack break, and then pizza shows up, and it's a half an hour later, you lost a lot of time. Things can happen, right? So, but don't be afraid to say you made a mistake when you made a mistake. When running a published module, read the whole thing twice. All right, mark that adventure up. You bought the book. You can write in there. You want to resell it. Then get the PDF and then print that and mark that up. Add notes. Add sticky notes. Add bookmarks. Dog ear your module. Whatever you have to do to make sure you remember important plot points, especially if they are so important that if you get them wrong, you're going to screw up the adventure. Note those things in. I was running a module recently. I was running Fate's Fell Hand for Dungeon Crawl Classics, and I screwed it up so bad early on. There were so many components to that module. I read through it quickly. I didn't read it a second time before I ran it, and I messed things up in that module, and that was on me. And I should have, I really should have spent more time or focus on reading it ahead of time. But if you are running a module and you screw something up so badly that it's going to ruin the adventure, don't be afraid to maybe retcon something here or there, especially if it's a little tiny tweak. Or lean into it and just throw the module out. Ultimately, it is your game, it is your table. So if you're halfway through the module, and like I was in Fate's Fell Hand, and you've just ruined it. You've destroyed the module. You are so off the rails, but you still want to finish that module, you can either rewrite the ending, you can twist some things around, or maybe a quick retcon. In my instance, I had the player characters come under the control of an NPC in the adventure, and some of the players didn't like that. And I knew the players had other characters in a character tree. They had other characters they could bring in, but they felt a loss of control and a loss of authority over the PCs, and they were right, and I had to make some adjustments the next time I ran the adventure. When running your own module, keep handy improv tools available, because maybe you don't flesh in every detail. Maybe you're like me and you write adventures with bullet points. In those instances, story cubes, those Rory story cubes, those are fantastic. Random encounter cards. Inkwell Designs makes great random encounter cards to keep with you. Or maybe just random tables that are out there. The 5e Dungeon Master's Guide has a lot of great tables in there. The DCC Lankmar book or box has all kinds of cool things you can find when you're about town. Alternatively, this is a great place where if you're running an adventure, you have an NPC detailed, this is when you ask your players, give me the details that you want, maybe for this NPC or the scene. What kind of weather do you think is outside? Things that maybe you didn't think up, let them come up with it. Players love that kind of stuff when they're giving some authority, at the table. But, this takes that pressure of you having to know everything off your head. And now you're just like leaning into it and saying, not only do I not know everything, but we're going to collaborate. This is more collaborative storytelling. So it's going to ease the moment, and it's going to add some more fun. Players, this is a note for all of you. Please tell your game master or dungeon master when you're having a good time, and please show your appreciation with them when you're having fun after the game is over. I will say, I do not think game masters are thanked often enough. And I'm just as guilty of this for the few times that I'm playing, as I'm sure many of you are. But thank your game masters, please. There's one thing I can tell players who are maybe aren't the forever GMs like me and other friends of mine. I can tell players I can help them help us at the table. Is thank your game masters and really show how much, share with them what you loved about the adventure. Share that before you tell them things you didn't like, because oftentimes I think players, when they leave the table, the things that frustrated them, that's what comes out. When we're playing video games, or board games or things like that, it's not uncommon when the game is over to share frustrations, which is fine. In most instances, 99.999% of the time, we don't have the video game writer in the room with us, unless I guess we're doing playtests, right? Or we don't have the designer of the board game with us. So when we're complaining into a vacuum. When players leave the table in front of their game master and will complain about something that happened, maybe it has nothing to do with anything the game master, thought up or did. Maybe it's just rolling poorly, or maybe it's just, character design. I know that when my players aren't having fun, I feel it, and it gets me. Even if it's something that I had no control over, because I do feel a responsibility to to help my players have a good time at the table. So I think it's something that we all need to be more thankful of each other anyway. Why not start with your game master, right? Finally, back to the game masters, just do your best. Enjoy the experience of being behind the screen. Know that for those moments that you're running your game, whether you're running it at the top of your game, or maybe it's not the best you've run a game, but when you are running your game, you are giving enjoyment to several people that maybe would be having a terrible night otherwise. Maybe you're taking their minds off of work, off of life, off of the pandemic, off of problems they're having at home. You're taking their minds and bringing it into your own fantasy world. And just if there's even if you don't do a perfect job running the game, you are making an impact in the world. I personally believe that running role-playing games as a game master, I think it's a calling. I think it's something that does do good for the world. We're the storytellers, right? Of our generation. And I think that I want to thank you all for running games, even if I never played with you. Those of you that I interact with online, thank you so much for contributing to the stuff that I do on my blog previously, the vlog now, on Twitter or wherever, and we communicate. I love hearing stuff, So I'm gonna thank you. And if this is a hobby, this is not work, right? So make sure to try and have a good time yourself. This is whenever you have friends over, or you're on Zoom, or you're running a game, make sure you take a step back and just appreciate that you're doing something that you love, and that you're doing something that does matter. So ultimately, will all these thoughts or ideas solve your imposter syndrome? No. It probably won't. You'll probably still. I've spent this morning writing this kind of stuff up, and then kind of putting my notes together, thinking this is going to be some cathartic experience at the end. I will solve my imposter syndrome. It won't, but it does help manage it. And ultimately, when it comes to issues with mental health or challenges we feel emotionally, it's not about a cure. It's not about solving the problem. It's about learning to work with the problem or around the problem, and maybe get the better of the problem. That's more of the challenge. So for the audience, for those of you who have your own struggles with imposter syndrome or game master inadequacy, what helps you? What helps you overcome these challenges? If you could leave it in the comments below, or hit me up over on Twitter at I Live for Crits and share it over there, that would be awesome. Well, thanks for watching. I hope this was some help for you, and I hope that this makes you more comfortable and confident behind the GM screen. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.